Okay, since I'm going to be the NC this morning, I just want to tell everybody, in case of emergency, find the quickest exit out. Set of stairs on each side. Well, that's what it says on the paper.
Oh, wait.
Okay. The mission of the Humanists of Greater Portland is to create a thriving local community that promotes the active ideal of humanism. And we're going to do today, we wanted, when the speaker talks, we're going to have everyone muted, and then he will take questions at the end of the meeting. And what we'd like is for you to type in on your chat platform the questions that you have, and he will answer them in the order that they come in. And he has chosen to read the questions himself instead of having somebody else read them to him.
That's good.
So he'll read them and then he'll answer them. Mm-hmm. Okay, we are a freedom of speech kind of group, but I must remind you that HGP does not take full responsibility for the material presented by our invited speakers, and they do not speak officially for the Humanists of Greater Portland, unless specifically noted otherwise. Now, we have a meeting once a week, and today we have this wonderful, wonderful person that's going to do the reading for us, and his name is Al Christensen. Al, step up here to the mic and say a few words.
Okay, our reading today is from the Enlightenment. Love Enlightenment readings. This is from The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman by Lawrence Stern, a novel that was published in 7 parts starting in 1759, I believe, and up till 1766. Oh. And it was Lawrence Stern, the author. It's an autobiographical kind of a novel. So the language you'll hear is that of the character Tristram Shandy, and it's the title of the book, of course, says Tristram Shandy was a gentleman. To prove he was a gentleman, that you'll see that you'll hear the word acme is in this reading, but he spelled it in the Greek. Alpha, Kappa, what's that called? Mu and Eta. So it looks kind of funny, but it's Greek for acme, and that's how I'll read it. And Lawrence Stern was one of our favorite category of Enlightenment writers. He was a clergyman whose writings were condemned by the church. And the reading is, Thus, my fellow laborers and associates in this great harvest of our learning, now ripening before our eyes, thus it is by slow steps of casual increase that our knowledge, physical, metaphysical, physiological, polemical, nautical, mathematical, enigmatical, technical, biographical, romantical, chemical, and obstetrical, with 50 other branches of it, most of them ending as these do in ickle, for the last 2 centuries and more, gradually been creeping upwards towards that acme of their perfections, from which, if we may form a conjecture from the advances of the last 7 years, we cannot possibly be far off. When that happens, it is hoped it will put an end to all kinds of writings whatsoever. The want of all kinds of writing will put an end to all kinds of reading. And that in time, as war begets poverty, peace, must in course put an end to all kind of knowledge. And then we shall have all to begin over again, or in other words, be exactly where we started.
Oh dear.
Thank you, Al.
We have asked Bernd Durrwachter, something of a technology guru, to be our initial speaker in HGP's first full Sunday meeting on this medium. Originally from Germany, where he became involved in technology innovation early, Bernd and others had determined that Germany was not the place to advance in that field in the 1990s. Once in the land of unbound opportunities, as the US was known then, he began to work with data management, then data warehousing, business intelligence, and analytics. That theme became big data, and now it's known as machine learning with the umbrella term artificial intelligence, or AI. His most recent business venture is a consulting company that focuses on data governance, AI ethics, and algorithmic accountability. We'll let him explain those terms. Having made nerdism into a kind of religion, Bernd says he reads academic papers and textbooks in bed before going to sleep. But he isn't always nerdy. It is just possible you might meet him on a hiking trail or on a ballroom dance floor. Right now, however, we're going to meet him on Zoom and find out more about ethics and accountability issues in AI. Welcome, Bernd.
So thank you for introduction. This is probably the first time ever that I get introduced at age 50 as a young man. I'm actually quite nervous because I'm the kind of person I do better in person when I can read the crowd. So this is like the first time I give a major presentation like without the real life audience. So bear with me. I'm gonna start my Google. I have to share an app here, so you will see a change in screen. Share screen. So I'm going to talk about mostly not so much about the technical aspect, but artificial intelligence. I'm assuming that we have some level of familiarity how it permeates our lives. So what I really want to focus on is how it impacts, from a humanist perspective, how it impacts people and what work has to be done to better integrate it with human society versus going into the details how it works and the party tricks it can perform. So I'm assuming a lot of us over the last 10, 15 years have seen the stories in the media, the success stories, well publicized, how Deep Blue, an IBM supercomputer, defeated Garry Kasparov back in '97, leading world chess champion, and then went on and on. IBM supercomputer beats Jeopardy champions. Then Google, not to be outcompeted, built this AlphaGo AI that beat the world champion in the Go game, Go being considered one of the most complicated human board games. But along the same lines of media publicity, we've also heard the horror stories. The Wall Street flash crash of 2010, where all algorithmically trading hedge funds all sought the exit at the same time. How Cambridge Analytica uses Facebook data to socially manipulate people for political gain. Various self-driving car accidents, or the media weaponizing with deep fakes, where you have Obama say things that he never said because it was trained by an AI and overlapped with somebody else's. Then you get the military autonomous weaponry, Facebook doing experiments with users. So there's a lot of stories that require attention, and that we need to think through how we solve that as a human problem, not just as a technology challenge. So what inspired me to get into the space, I started out as a technologist, but now I'm probably spending more time studying sociology, social psychology than actual computers, because there's nothing really new under the sun from a computational technology standpoint. It's just a recombination of existing stuff. But people who are not AI or technology specialists get so carried away by modern computer science, and if you have Instagram filters or WhatsApp filters that make cute cat faces out of your pictures. There's a lot of gadgetry that people get enamored with, but AI is a tool that can be used for good and bad. And what's really not that visible is we're delegating more and more human judgment to machines that are AI powered, that basically use data to pass judgment. And I'm going to give a couple of examples later on how this affects us, but it opens a whole universe of questions should be asked. Like, artificial intelligence is like little kids. It gets taught. That's the difference between traditional computer logic that gets programmed to execute a certain task repeatedly, mechanically, versus artificial intelligence learns by observing data, sensory, or what it's being taught. So it's kind of like a kid can grow up to be a racist if it has the wrong parents, or it can be a do-gooder if it has the right role models. And so the questions, what should we teach artificial intelligence? How should it behave? What is right? What is wrong? For whom? What are the limits? And I'm going to dive into those with this presentation. Move forward. This is very text heavy because I don't have a secondary screen for my speaker notes. So part of that is for me to help me comment on it. It's worth starting. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, how does it relate to when we talk about intelligence? Those of you who've been in teaching know that there isn't exactly a consensus in what human intelligence and natural intelligence is. So as a working definition, I put this together from various sources, and I'm not the authority on it, but just as a working definition, if we somewhat can relate to, we assume that intelligence is using logic, understanding, self-awareness, learning, basically to deal with real world problems, to pursue goals, just, going to eat so we're not hungry and we don't starve, or taking care of our family, or driving to work. And generally, if I had to translate this more, if I would have to program a computer to do all these things, it's basically I have to teach it how to perceive or infer information. This is where the whole computer vision, recognizing numbers, recognizing text, natural language processing, computer vision goes at. Retaining this knowledge. There's this whole concept in AI called knowledge representation. How do I store that so I can, oops, sorry about that, my computer is very sensitive. I'm on a laptop and it has this weird touch surface that acts on its own sometimes. And the key point being of anything intelligent that it adapts to its circumstances of the environment. It doesn't just rudely execute some procedure, but adapts to its environment based on what its goals are. So I've thrown a whole bunch of definitions out there. There's actually, I don't have it right here, but there's a textbook that two professors from Stanford and Berkeley wrote. It's been around for 30 years. It's in its 4th edition. It's published by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig. Peter Norvig is a director for research at Google, and Stuart Russell is still teaching. And they kind of put this into these 4 quadrants. If you think of what's the goal of artificial intelligence, and there's like kind of 2 axes to that. There's the thinking part. You can think humanly, think rationally, or act humanly, act rationally. And the distinction there being thinking versus acting. Right? You can act before you think with adverse consequences, or you can think first and then act. And then the difference between well, I get all these admit messages here. The difference between humanly, rationally is basically when you control an airplane, you don't want to have any emotions involved, right? But on the other hand, if you interact with humans, you need to have an emotional component so you don't come across as Spock. So there's different cases for different uses where you want an AI to be more affectionate and empathic, or an AI that's non-emotional, not drama, in a critical situation that it doesn't have all the human emotions that cause drama. So this case, none of them, they're just different ways to looking at it. And by the way, I'm planning to share my deck. There's a lot of text in there, and I have a lot of references to other resources. I'll be happy to put this out for sharing with people who want to read through it at their leisure and click through the actual resources. Whoa. Sorry for the jerking around. It always helps a couple more than I intended to. So today we have kind of different levels of capability, and a lot of these chess and Go playing and Jeopardy playing computers, they're considered weak AI. Now that sounds very interesting if somebody beats Garry Kasparov or Ken Jennings in those champions. The thing is that Garry Kasparov and Ken Jennings, they can drive cars, they can interact with their family, they can do a variety of other things. The AlphaGo only can play Go. The Deep Blue only can play chess. They're very single trick pony, really, as impressive as they are within that discipline, but they're relatively weak. They're not anywhere close to human intelligence because these world Go and chess players can do a variety of other things other than playing, those games. So that's considered weak AI. Strong AI, also referred to as artificial general intelligence, AGI. That's mostly hypothetical. It doesn't really exist yet. That would be the human level. Basically, how is this different? So a chess computer plays under fixed rules, has all the information, right? You can see the chessboard, you have all the information. There's a limited set of rules, even if the number of moves in chess are extraordinary, but they're still bounded. They're still it's a very limited system, versus a human has to deal with an ambiguous world, contradicting information, hidden motives of other actors, right? So what makes a human distinct from a computer so far is that humans can deal with ambiguity and have intuitions and be creative, and so far there hasn't really been any artificial intelligence or robot that's truly been able to do that. Even if you've seen the Sophia robot, a lot of the robots are designed to evoke our human empathy, to think they're smart, but they're likable. They're not necessarily intelligent, they're just likable because of the visual appearance. And then super AI is that what Nick Bostrom, a professor at Oxford University, he wrote a book about it in 2014, warning us of the super intelligence outsmarting us. Exactly how that would look like is not clear, because that Terminator scenario, that's like a Hollywood scenario. But my hope is if we get to the level where we build AI that's smarter than all humans collectively, then we can give it the wicked problems that we humans are not able to solve. So here's just a quick summary for where AI is used to do medical diagnosis. My brother works in medical imaging. They do very early tumor detection. With cancer, the earlier detected, the more successful the treatment is. Stock market speculation. Actually, a lot of the stock market liquidity is driven now by algorithms. Risk management, fraud detection, marketing campaigns. It's kind of like the bread and butter of Google and Facebook. Very tailored marketing based on personality profiles. Chatbots, especially like whenever you're online and somebody asks you, "Can I help you?" That's usually a bot. They try to pretend to be human. They have a human face, and then it's just a AI that learned how to speak English. Political campaigns, Cambridge Analytica, obviously. Economic forecasting, weather forecasting, entertainment. Recommender systems, suggestions. That's basically Netflix telling you might also like this movie, or Amazon people who bought this stuff might also like that, right? Make those kind of recommendations. I don't expect you to understand this formula. I don't either. It's just the point is all what we call artificial intelligence today boils down to math. Right? This is I would say 12th grade math. Right? You got an exponent, you got the e, you got a fraction, you got a sigmoid. These are things. I actually never went to high school in the U.S., but in Germany we learned this like in the 11th grade, and let's say you learned this here in the first 2 years of college math, right? And the difference being one variable, and in a modern AI, they call it artificial neural network. You just basically have lots of those same equation, millions of them all connected to each other. That's what makes it complex. But if you really focus on it, and it's really, there's no magic to it. It's just a lot of it and all interconnected. This is an example how computer vision works. I don't expect you to make sense out of it. I'm just trying to illustrate the point. It's math, and then everything's connected with each other. Here's kind of like a text version of what I just said. Basically, most common form of machine learning, the core of artificial intelligence today, algorithms that look at examples being data you give them, or sensory input of a robot as it walks through a room, and then they're given guidance as to what the examples represent. Like, this is a cat, no, this is a dog, this is a mouse, right? Only similar how you would teach a kid when they're early on, you go through a picture book and tell them what animal it is, and that's how they learn by example. That's also referred to as supervised learning. Or they can learn by themselves just by the correlation. That's kind of how kids learn language. They listen to people talking, and then they realize certain speech patterns, and whenever they happen in a certain context, they get conditioned to assume, oh, whenever my parents say mouse and I see the animal, then that must be a mouse, right? And then there's reinforcement learning, just like humans learn also. If the robot or the algorithm does something right, then it's given a reward, which is basically a mathematical variable that just gets increased, like yes, positive, or nope, you shouldn't do this, gets decreased. And this is basically the underlying logic of an artificial neural network, which underlies, that's the technology that modern artificial intelligence is driven by. You also often hear the term deep learning. So machine learning has been around for 50 years, but what is different with deep learning in the last 10 years is why did AI explode in recent years? There's basically a couple of factors. We have advances in computing power. There's this concept of Moore's law, where computing power doubles every 18 months for the same price. You get more computing power. You get massive amounts of data suddenly, and that's kind of a consequence of people having broad social acceptance of people sharing data about their lives, which is enabled by everybody carrying around mobile devices that gathers data. And that is also combined with a smartphone app ecosystem, where every app that you use a weather app, and it monitors where you're walking, even though it has nothing to do with the app itself, but they're gathering that data. And all of that combined with refinements in statistical algorithms, as I just showed you with the neural network, these factors all interplay with each other, why it's all of a sudden possible to predict flu outbreaks or traffic jams, or predict all these really hard to understand things, because of that massive amount of data, that computing power, and these modern algorithms, and that's a key point. It's a non-technical factor. People's social acceptance that it's okay for most people to, yeah, you can use my data for the greater good, I guess. So if AI is smart, what could possibly go wrong? And not sure if you heard of this, but Microsoft had a very successful chatbot in China. There was a social chatbot, and the idea was we're going to have this chatbot learn how to talk on something like Twitter. I forgot what the Chinese version is called. And they thought if it can learn that in Chinese, then it should be very easy to do it in all other languages. So the experiment in China worked really well because the average Chinese internet user is very obedient and friendly because they know they're monitored by the government. So Microsoft took the idea to the American internet or Western internet. Well, it was a different audience. So this bot was basically taught by the people it talked with on Twitter. So this happened. And these are just quotes. I don't endorse any of these messages, but these are real things that actually happened. This Microsoft Tweet bot, not because Microsoft told it so, but because of the people that talked with that bot learned to talk like that. And it turns out there was a bunch of internet trolls that deliberately try to hack that bot and teach it bad manners, basically. And then the thing talked like this, and after 24 hours, it got shut down. I like the comment of the person on the right, upper right hand there, where it says, wow, it only took them hours to ruin this bot. And that's a real thing, basically. This is an AI that's supposed to be super smart, but it's only as smart as its teachers, right? And the teachers in this case was the general public or a particular group of internet trolls who, you know, those are probably the same folks who bombed like Zoom meetings, but you know, we know they're out there. I have to take this off screen. It's disgusting to look at that. So this is a good example that, you know, it doesn't automatically go right. It being AI doesn't mean it's automatically morally smart. So some of the recurring issues and concerns here are value alignment. This is a common term that the AI community is referring to. Value alignment is basically the bot had this Twitter bot had no idea what was wrong. Like we look at it as humans, like that's not okay to talk racist, misogynist, and this hate speech, but that bot was never taught it. I wasn't supposed to know, right? I didn't have that value system. Discrimination is one of the issues. I'm going to share a case where computer algorithms are used to decide whether somebody gets released from prison, and it disproportionately affects African Americans to their disadvantage. Manipulation, like deep fakes, you know, the whole fake news where you can Photoshop videos now. And then economic displacement, increasing job automation, putting more and more people out of the job without alternate means of income. For that case I was talking about, in some cases, judges are using, and in some jurisdictions are using the software of one particular company. They're kind of a monopoly and the market leader. Company is called Northpoint. The software is called Compass, and based on historic data, they basically give a recommendation whether somebody has had a chance to reoffend. I think it's referred to as recidivism. And disproportionately, they let white people out who then reoffend, and they keep black people in prison who had a lower probability. So it's been proven since that its algorithm is completely faulty and biased based on the data it was trained with. And that's a real thing. It's still going, it's still running, and it's a, you know, there's this magic around it. Well, it's an AI, you know, it's a computer making the decision. It's completely neutral versus some biased judge. Well, you know, AI can be biased too. It just depends on how it's being trained. And then the other thing I talked about, I'm going to share a little video here. The media manipulation through deep fakes. See if this works with the sound. If you see it playing and you don't hear anything, shake your head so I get feedback whether you can hear this.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
So what was that supposed to illustrate is basically this manipulation aspect. So what I just showed is referred to as deep fakes. It's a technology that basically combines, you take the likelihood of Barack Obama, the way he looks, his mannerisms, the sound of his voice, his general facial expressions. You can extract the underlying dynamics, how he typically moves his face, what makes us recognize him as who he is. And then you overlay that with somebody else's actions. It's that journalist, Jordan Peele, who basically, he was the one who was talking and the mimicry. And then you can merge that. You've probably seen it with art where they take a photography of a couple of houses, medieval village, and then apply a Van Gogh filter on it. And next thing you know, you have a starry night, that imagery applied to a photograph. That's called deep fakes. And you can imagine in the current ecosystem of people with confirmation bias, what damage that can do. And that's basically the underlying technology is neural networks that drive this kind of capability. The huge media risk that could arise from that. Let's see, how do I get this back? Hang on, I see some chat questions here. So now that I do all the scaremongering, here's a little bit of light at the tunnel, that there's broad recognition around that something needs to be done now. And the question is, what do we do? Is it a technical problem? And there's a whole movement now. No, really, it's an ethical problem. It's basically humans making a decision what's the right thing that should be taught, right? And I think this particular group is probably very familiar with the concept of ethics, being humanists. But at the essence, what we need to teach the artificial intelligence, think of it just like how you would raise a kid. A kid comes with this somewhat blank slate. I know that's disputed, but what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? We're basically trying to teach an AI what's right, what's wrong, right? And what are we trying to prevent here? Accidents, right? If it doesn't know what's right or wrong, it will do things that it wasn't really badly intended. But at the same time, there could be bad actors who know very well that something goes wrong, but they don't really care, right? Their goal isn't really to hurt other people, but if they can make a quick buck, they're going to pollute the environment. So that's reckless behavior. And then you got the malicious intent of bad actors whose whole goal is, acts of terrorism or hate crimes, whose goal is to harm other people, right? And they could use artificial intelligence in order to amplify or as a tool to do so. So those are things that we need to think about. How do we translate that into a value system for artificial intelligence to bound itself? And then there's a whole, under D, I listed the secondary effects that a lot of intentions might be well in the short term, but they have long-term consequences, like Facebook connecting people. The short-term intent or the immediate intent was to connect people, but the long-term effect is that people feel more lonely. Nobody's ever considered that. And that kind of translates into the more fluffy area of human well-being. It's not immediate danger or accident, but it still has an adverse effect on humans. How can people be harmed? This is just a short selection, but it's just to start the thought, like what are the aspects that we're trying to guard against? Discrimination, right? The judgment by why are Black people being kept in prison by a recidivism algorithm. Exploitation, the whole emotional manipulation by Facebook to keep us more engaged. Violence, the whole hate crime or people getting harassed online. I'm going to show you, did this work? Can you guys nod if the last video came across okay with sound and video? Because I'm going to play another one that's a little bit longer. This is basically about people doing a survey on value system, how a self-driving car should make difficult decisions when it encounters a dangerous situation. Like if somebody's crossing the street, the car shows up, and they did a survey worldwide, and those interesting insights that I thought I want to share with you here.
Who would you save? The pedestrian in the road or the drivers in the car? It's not easy, and yet that's the kind of decision which millions of autonomous cars would have to make in the near future. We program the machine, but who do we tell it to save? That is the setup of the moral machine experiment.
There are so many moral decisions that we usually make during the day we don't realize. In driverless cars, these decisions will have to be implemented ahead of time. The goal was to open this discussion to the public.
Some decisions might seem simple. Should the car save a family of 4 or a cat? But what about a homeless person and their dog instead of a businessman? Or how about 2 athletes and an old woman instead of 2 school children?
The problem was that there were so many combinations, so many possible accidents, that it seemed impossible to investigate them all using classic social science methods.
Not only that, but how do people's culture and background affect the decisions that they make?
The only option we had really was to turn it into a viral website. Of course, it's easier said than done, right?
But that is exactly what the team managed to do. They turned these situations into an online task that people across the globe wanted to share and take part in. They gathered almost 40 million moral decisions taken from millions of online participants across 233 countries and territories from all around the world. The results are intriguing. First, there are 3 fundamental principles which hold true across the world.
The main results of the paper for me are first, the big 3 in people's preferences, which is save human, save the greater number, save the kids. And the second most interesting finding was the clusters, the clusters of countries with different moral profiles.
The first cluster included many Western countries. The second cluster had many Eastern countries. And the third cluster had countries from Latin America and also from former French colonies.
The cultural difference we find are sometimes hard to describe because they're multidimensional, but some of them are very striking, like the fact that Eastern countries do not have such a strong preference for saving young lives. Eastern countries seem to be more respectful of older people, which I thought was a very interesting finding.
And it wasn't just age. One cluster showed an unexpectedly strong preference for saving women over men.
I was also struck by the fact that French and the French subcluster was so interested in saving women. That was, I'm still not quite sure what's going on here.
Another surprising finding concerned people's social status.
On one side, we put male and female executives, and other side, we put a homeless person. The higher the economic inequality in a country, the more people were willing to spare the executives at the cost of the homeless people.
This work provides new insight into how morals change across cultures, and the team see particular relevance to the field of artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles.
In the grand scheme of it, I think these results are going to be very important to align artificial intelligence to human values. We sometimes change our mind. Other people next to us don't think the same thing we do. Other countries don't think the same things we do. So aligning AI and human moral value is only possible if we do understand these differences, and that's what we try to do. I so much hope that we can converge, that we avoid a future where you have to learn about the new ethical setting of your car every time you cross a border.
Anyway, so this is a good showcase of why this is actually a human problem to be solved, not a technical one. We as humans have to figure out what we want to teach the AI, and then the rest is kind of details as to how to enforce that. But there's, let's see, where are we in the presentation? I did a survey of a lot of efforts of governmental bodies, research think tanks, and various companies, like companies like Microsoft and Google, and they're getting ahead. They've been proactively coming up with standards, in fear of being overregulated. So they propose standards, and there's a theme that I picked up. Basically, when we say ethical AI, there's other terms that we're using meaning kind of the same thing. So, for example, in the European Union, they make reference to human-centric. No matter what it is, it needs to be human-centric, because we already have a human rights charter. We don't have to reinvent the wheel there. It needs to be trustworthy, right? Especially because of the fake, deep fakes and the media manipulation. We need to know that what it does is what it intends to do, that it's not being used to mislead people. It needs to be reliable and secure, right? Cars running over people is not a safe thing physically. They need to be friendly, right? They don't need to amplify hate crimes, the harassment. Being transparent, It goes along the lines with trustworthy and accountable. Basically, if they do things that are not acceptable, there needs to be a mechanism how you can give them feedback that's not okay to do, and this reward and punishment function. And one of the things that they were obvious to me, but I don't think they're obvious to a lot of people, when we talk about AI ethics, a lot of people assume that you need to teach the AI how to behave ethical. But AI is right now used as a tool, as a companion of human actors, of business people, right? Google uses AI to amplify the advertising effectiveness. Facebook is using AI to socially manipulate people to stay more online and engage, so they get more data from them. It's actually humans making the decision what to use AI for and what the AI does. So a lot of the responsibility is actually in the human stakeholder. What are their intentions to use AI for, to hold them accountable and to instill ethical behavior in the human actor before we get to the point. AI right now is not conscious or sentient that you could hold it accountable. It's the creator, kind of like akin to a child, right? When I'm a 12-year-old and I throw a stone through a window, or when did I do that? When I was 8 years old, throw a stone through the window of an old house that I thought was funny. It was my parents who had to pay the bill because I wasn't legally liable. It's along the same lines. So this is just a reaction to what I just said, right? Today, AI does a lot of powerful things, but it's not autonomous. It still acts under, in human context, humans telling it what the range of. It's not conscious yet. It's not sentient yet. We're very far removed from that yet. It's still very much human controlled. I think I pointed this out earlier. This is redundant. What are the sources of risks and dangers? So here's a let's see. My slide is out of order, but I'm going to skip this because I'm going to dive into this graphic a little bit later. One of the problems, obviously, you guys, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. You know a lot of this stuff. The problem is, if we teach AI and value system, what is going to be? It's not exactly that we as humans agree, like the video just pointed out, let alone in this country, right? It's not that we all agree on that certain populations need to be protected or not being discriminated upon when you have racists walking around who do think that some people are more superior than others, right? So we don't even have a consensus amongst us humans. So what are we supposed to tell an AI? And then not everything is beautiful, like computer science binary either or, but a lot of, there's these dilemmas, right? I do something good on one side and then it harms somebody else. This whole, when the doctors with COVID had to decide who they're going to give a ventilator to, they've kind of been in the same moral dilemma like the cart driver has, right? Do you give it to a person who's young or who's old, or how do you decide, no matter which way you go, you're going to harm somebody? What's your preference? Those are really difficult questions that are completely unrelated to technology that we as humans need to solve first. I'm not going to read through all of this and don't expect you to see or read this, but the point I was trying to make out as I was looking through what the different governments are doing, I looked at the White House gov, and while the Trump administration does have an AI vision, it's all based on business and how to outcompete other countries. There was no reference to ethics or any concerns of safety. But somewhere, they deleted everything that Obama did previously, but they forgot there was a document that was still on there. And they did have a vision. It was a larger document, but they did have a chapter on fairness, safety, and governance. Ethicists have raised concerns about unintended consequences of widespread adoption of AI, transparency, explanation for any AI-based determination, trying to understand and predict the behavior of advanced AI systems. So back in 2016, the previous administration actually did take into account there's this aspect of fairness, safety, and governance we have to consider, and that kind of went out of the window, and right now it's all about business and competition. But now that was the White House. In US Congress, actually, just last year, Cory Booker and then a couple of Democrats basically proposed the Algorithmic Accountability Act. I don't have the number in there. It's like HR bill. It was proposed, but never really didn't go anywhere. But it was along those lines. And I think New York State already has a law around transparency on when algorithms are used to make decisions. And then there's a Future of AI Act also, which is more the generic, like where should it go? But there are attempts in Congress to address, in full recognition that AI could pose problems, and we need to have a legal framework around how to govern that. The EU is probably the closest or the deepest into them, because as a result of World War II, a lot of countries became acutely aware of where unethical behavior can lead to. So, like for example, the German government has an ethics council that includes representatives from all the major religions, even atheists and some philosophers that advise the government. And in the constitution itself, you have reference to human dignity being a priority. So what the guidelines on ethics and AI did basically said, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to anchor on our existing. Okay, I saw the question on the UN. I'll get to that later. That basically says, before we reinvent the wheel, let's look at the, so to your question about United Nations Charter of Human Rights, let's look at what we already established, what human rights are, and make sure that AI is not going to violate that, what we already have established, that what the standards are. And then, of course, you go into great detail. The document is like 200 pages long. And at the end of this presentation, I have a lot of links to online resources, and I'll be happy to share this with you. But I thought that this is of course, I'm biased, right, because I grew up in Europe. But I thought that it's a reasonable stance to start with the human rights and then see AI just as another tool, just like cars and airplanes and rockets, right? Remarkably, I don't expect you to read all of this, but the fact that this is a translation of the Communist Party, the Congress in China, that they've thought through this. Now, whether they actually implement this is another question, but the fact that they thought it through and had, articulated a stance on it. And I don't want to stereotype anything, but I found the first paragraph, your harmony and friendliness, very, very curious. It seems to be reflective of my impressions with Asian cultures, right? That it's all about harmony and friendliness in social interactions. So that was an interesting wording, how you would want to hold AI accountable. And again, I don't know if they actually holding to that, but they have a statement, and the current White House, U.S. White House doesn't. So that was very interesting. Again, I'll share this with you later. You don't have to read through this right now. So somebody asked about the UN. There's actually so much material. I didn't put it all in this presentation as a slide, but yeah, the UN does have something, because the OECD, which is what, the top 10 richest countries? No, that's a G10, but there's various networks of countries. They've all thought this through from a business standpoint, and then of course they were worried about acceptance. So Harvard University has probably the most comprehensive review of what's out there. It won't fit on the screen here. So this graphic, I can't even read it on my screen. It's just too detailed. But there's a zoom on the right side. I basically zoom into the part where it says key themes on that circle. You can see that on the right. I zoomed in just so we can read what those key themes are, right? International human rights, promotion of human values, professional responsibility. And what they did basically around that circle on the outside, these are all sources, intergovernmental organizations, multi-stakeholder, private sector, civil society. Those are all organizations that have done research or proposed ethical principles. And the size of these dots in the circle represent how mature, how deep their considerations go along those key themes. And I have a link in this presentation at the end to, it's a PDF file. It's a really cool read because they did a really broad survey of what's out there. And that's from, I think, 2018. It's not even current. But the fact that there's so much, my main point sharing this is to point out there's a lot of people thinking and recognizing this. So this is not being unrecognized. There's people working on this, which is very encouraging. I couldn't help it. After all the dry material, I thought I have to put something funny in there. So if you've seen the Mars Attack movie where the Martians have this translation device, they shoot and kill all the Earthlings, and then the translation device says, "Don't run, we are your friends." So when the Chinese AI ethics principle says friendliness, I just thought about the whole Google kept talking about, don't be evil. And in hindsight, we know Google kind of started what we call surveillance capitalism now, right? So it's like, be careful what's being stated versus what really happens. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a prescription from my perspective, what I think can be done, should be done, a little bit of call to action. And other people already thought through these as well. There's this concept of adversarial AI. Instead of having an AI going rogue, or a lot of AIs behaving the same way, like in the stock market crash, where they went off or they exited at the same time based on the same profit ambition, you could have AIs as human representatives and create a diversity where AIs do have different value systems and they negotiate in the cyber realm, just like we in democracies or international treaties have to negotiate as humans. So you could have AIs that's perfectly fine. They have different goals, and then they will haggle, negotiate, and trade with each other, right? Basically, diversity would be one of the answers to that moral dilemma. Stuart Russell, one of the authors of the AI textbook I shared, the professor at Berkeley who teaches artificial intelligence. He has this concept of programming AI to be humble, to assume that it doesn't know anything, even though it's being trained, just like a human, like a old school like negotiation was based on back and forth. Like you say something, or good communication, you say something, and then I feed back on you. I heard you say this. Is this what you meant? Is this what you really mean? Are you sure you really want to do this? Right. So humans interact. It's interactive. They don't just give them orders and then execute like a soldier. In daily life, we interact, we negotiate, we question and answer. And he proposed to create AI along those lines, to be humble, to be trained, but second guess itself, second guess its own understanding, constantly trying to clarify. It's like, are you sure you want, you asked me to kill this terrorist. Are you sure this is a terrorist? What makes you think so, right? And, I think this approach, or it's a philosophical approach for now, but I thought that was an interesting approach. These are more things from my perspective. I think the first step needs to be education, a broad AI literacy in the population. Other than maybe this group, you guys are all fairly inquisitive and critical thinkers, but the majority of people really, they're either totally gullible and think, oh wow, AI trust it because you think computers are so smart when they're really not. Or you have people who are super cynical and then see the next conspiracy theory behind AI, which is not productive either to address the actual issues. I would also imagine we should have some sort of bill of rights, right? That AI, if AI get to the level where they are on par with human actors, we should, certain rights and duties should transfer to them as well. Anchored again in value systems and ensure the well-being of humans. There's actually a movement of human rights for robots, which was very curious. I thought, how about we have human rights for all humans first? But you see that discussion needs to happen, and more people need to become aware that this is an inflection point in society and in history where everybody should be part of that discussion, of that conversation. Enforceable compliance policies. I mean, the beautiful thing with robots and computers, they are much easier to control than people. You can write other programs that law enforce, or terminate or, lock up. It's much easier to technologically control computers than it is humans. Have oversight mechanisms, right? First, you have to know what's going on. Like the same surveillance that they do on us as consumers, we should be able to do that on the algorithms and the bots and the companies using them as well. And then, of course, you can have market incentives and disincentives to guide, make it very costly for an AI to pursue profit. So my call to action is more transparency on data sets, data selection criteria that's used to train AI. Transparency on the objectives and goals that the algorithms pursue, and then the intention of the sponsors. I mean, one of the big problems is manipulation. I'm promising you to give you this, but under the covers I'm doing that. There needs to just be more transparency. And that goes back to, they know everything about our lives, they monitor our behavior and our moves and our moods. Why wouldn't we have the same right to do this about the systems that monitor us and the actors that exploit that? And I think I said so this is the last slide. This is the section with a lot of resources that I told you that I'd be happy to share. You can click through, and I actually have a whole wiki. If you really want to deep dive, I think I sent Ingrid a link to my wiki. There's a lot of good stuff out there. That gives me hope that there's plenty of researchers, NGOs, even politicians recognizing the challenges and know that it's just like, how do we actually address it concretely? That's kind of in the works right now. So that was it from my end. So now I'm open for questions, I guess. Start your slide. It's difficult for humans to sort out truth from deep fakes, so it would be especially hard in designing AI. That's a good question, and because it's widely recognized that deep fakes are going to be a big problem. This all started what we call photoshopping now, where people are manipulating pictures, and there are actually statistical methods to figure out whether a picture has been manipulated. You can also watermark digital media. You can put like some sort of checksum into a digital object that can be data files or pictures or videos. And then when that watermark, when that video is copied or manipulated, that watermark breaks. It's kind of like how money bills work. It's very hard to copy or counterfeit a money bill because there's so many unique features that are hard to reproduce. The same technology could be used for deep fakes, where you have a checksum on the original, let's say the BBC News broadcasts reporter's video, and when that gets doctored, there's technical ways to certify that it's been tampered with. The technology is there. We just have to have a habit of adoption and a common standard that all of us will only accept, it's kind of like encrypting your email. It's possible, but it's very hard to do unless Apple makes its default email, or Apple, whatever the smartphone makers automatically build that in, because most people wouldn't know how to execute the computer commands to encrypt your email. So it has to be standardized, but the technology is definitely there to detect it and fight it. It's an arms race anyway between those who make the fakes and those who want to detect them. How would super AI handle the trolley car problem? Not familiar with the trolley car. Oh, is that the runaway trolley?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it was answered by the self-driving car. Okay. UN have stance on AI. Yes, they do. I took a lot out. My presentation was way longer, but yeah, I'm not sure if I have it in the links, but there's something anchored to the UN Charter of Human Rights. I've noticed that people are not afraid of computers in a metal case, but when it's suddenly an android which looks human, people suddenly think it's intentionality because it has a human face. Yep, it's the what's it called, anthropomorphizing, right? As soon as it has human features, and it's one of the challenges that, you know, this Sophia robot, it looks like a human, it socially behaves like a human, but it's not necessarily intelligent. It just fools us into this, oh, it looks like me, you know. That's a good point. What about hacking by one AI system on others?
The basic concept of what he wanted to get through to everybody today was that AI is a very good tool if it's used correctly, but there's so many problems and so many places that people can interject their own thoughts that it's going to be hard to get the machine to do what the right thing is, because it's going to have bias built in. And the good example is the different countries, certain countries would run over a child before they would an old man, because they think the old man may be your boss. So you don't want to do that. And other places, they always, it seems like they always go for the women to save instead of the men. And that's built into the bias of the programmer. So there's just really a lot of things that, it's just kind of strange if you don't think about in advance that you just do. And we got to come up with some conclusion on how, you're going to have to program each one by country or by state. So it's going to be, it's a lot more to it than just saying, okay, I got a smart car that can drive straight down the road.
More questions? Binary choice situations seem artificial. Yeah, the artificial moral dilemmas, I agree. Will there ever be technology, a type of AI, to help resolve the deep divisions in societal values? That's a good question. My take on that is, I think the divisions are actually caused by media manipulation. So in a way, these media manipulation tools have caused it in the first place. And that's the moral dilemma. Who gets to choose what these media manipulation tools should be used for, towards what end, right? I don't think it's a technology question. The technology is there to switch people's behavior and emotions. It's just to what end and who gets to decide that. Maybe AI will help us humans get over supernatural beliefs which aren't universal. I think also it's more the opposite, that it's much easier to create the illusion of magic. Because we see a resurgence now where people don't understand how the science works and they ascribe magical attributes. The more visual magic happens, or visual stuff, and people don't understand the algorithms, the more people think, oh, it's magical. So I think it's going the opposite then. There'll be more superstition.
Yeah, I have a question if I could ask it.
Yeah, go ahead.
In a world where, or are these cultural studies that have been made trying to distinguish how different cultures, people in different traditions make decisions, has the question of religion been folded into its influence on cultural choices? It seems to me that different religious traditions are also going to guide people towards different answers.
Very possible. One of the things that I heard was, I don't have any immediate quotes or references, but there was rejection that some people thought, AI was the work of the devil because it is so powerful. If an AI is truly considered superhuman, then it achieves like godlike status, and some people were concerned about that. I'm not sure that relates to your question, Steve, but I haven't seen anything where directly religious values were translated. It was more like the universal human values that are across all world religion, but not specifically tied. I haven't seen anybody trying to use AI to further their particular religious ideology.